Hi, and welcome to today's Daily Chronicle. Today is Thursday, March 5th, 2026. U.S. military used laser to take down border protection drone, lawmakers say. People stand in line at check-in counters at El Paso International Airport on Wednesday, February 11th, 2026, in El Paso, Texas. The U.S. military used a laser to shoot down a Customs and Border Protection drone. Members of Congress said Thursday, and the Federal Aviation Administration responded by closing more airspace near El Paso, Texas. It's not clear why the laser was deployed, but it's the second time in 2 weeks that one has been fired in the area. The military is required to formally notify the FAA anytime it takes any counter-drone action inside the U.S. airspace. The earlier laser firing did not hit a target. It was done by the CBP near Fort Bliss, about 50 miles, 80 kilometers northwest, and prompted the FAA to shut down air traffic at El Paso Airport and the surrounding area. This time, the closure was smaller and commercial flights were not affected. U.S. Representative Rick Larsen and two other top Democrats on the House Transportation and Infrastructure and Homeland Security committees said they were stunned when they were officially notified. Our heads are exploding over the news, the lawmakers said in a joint statement. They criticized Trump administration for sidestepping a bipartisan bill to train drone operators and improve communication among the Pentagon, FAA, and the Department of Homeland Security. Now we're seeing the results of its incompetence, they said. Government defends use of anti-drone laser. The FAA, CBP, and the Pentagon issued a joint statement late Thursday that acknowledged the military employed counter-unmanned aircraft system. Authorities to mitigate a seemingly threatening unmanned aerial system operating within military airspace. The statement said it happened far from populated areas and commercial flights as part of the administration's efforts to strengthen protection at the border. At President Trump's direction, the Department of War, FAA, and Customs and Border Control are working together in an unprecedented fashion to mitigate drone threats by Mexican cartels and foreign terrorist organizations at the U.S.-Mexico border. The statement said the bottom line is the Trump administration is doing more to secure the border and crack down on cartels than any administration in history. Second time, these laser systems shut down Texas airspace this month. The El Paso shutdown 2 weeks ago lasted only a few hours, but it raised alarm and led to a number of flight cancellations. In the city of nearly 700,000 people not far from the Mexican border. In that case, an anti-drone laser was deployed by CBP near Fort Bliss without coordinating with the FAA, which then decided to close the El Paso airspace to ensure commercial air safety. According to sources familiar with what happened, who aren't authorized to discuss it. Afterward, members of Congress said it appeared to be another example of dysfunction. Within the government, with different agencies. Failing to coordinate with each other. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said he was planning to brief members of Congress sometime this week about what happened. He said at an unrelated news conference last Friday that it wasn't a mistake for the FAA to close the airspace in El Paso, and that he doesn't think it was a communication issue that led to the problems. Lawmakers demand an investigation. Democrat Senator Tammy Duckworth, the ranking member of the Senate's Aviation Subcommittee, said this alarming situation demands independent investigations. The Trump administration's incompetence continues to cause chaos in our skies, Duckworth said. The investigation into last year's mid-air collision near Washington, D.C. between an airliner and Army helicopter that killed 67 people highlighted how the FAA and Pentagon were not always working well together. The National Transportation Safety Board said the FAA and the Army did not share safety data with each other about the alarming number of close calls around Reagan National Airport and failed to address the risks. Concerns about drone threats growing. 2 months ago, Congress agreed to have more law enforcement agencies, including some state and local departments, the authority to take down rogue drones as long as they are properly trained. Previously, only a select few federal agencies held that power. Armed drones carry out devastating attacks daily in Ukraine and have also allowed Ukraine to strike deep within Russia. The U.S. government has handed out more than $250 million to help the states prepare to respond to drones before hosting the World Cup matches and celebrations planned this summer for America's 250th birthday. Another $250 million in grants will be awarded later this year to strengthen the nation's drone defenses. Drones already causing problems. Drones already cause problems along the border. Cartels routinely use drones to deliver drugs across the Mexican border and surveil Border Patrol officers. Officials told Congress last summer that more than 27,000 drones were detected within 1,600 feet, or 500 meters, of the southern border in the last 6 months of 2024. The threat to planes from drones continues to increase, along with the number of near misses around airports. Homeland Security estimates that there are more than 1.7 million registered drones flying in the United States, and that number has been growing. Anti-drone systems can use radio signals to jam drones, or high-powered microwaves or laser beams like the ones they have been used in Texas that are capable of disabling the machines. Some others station small drones to take flight quickly and ram into threatening drones. And there are systems that use bullets, but those are more common on battlefields than in domestic use. A man is halted climbing the U.S.-Mexico border wall. Under new Trump rules, U.S. troops sound the alarm.
I'm here on the southern border of New Mexico in a newly designated military zone where over the years and even in recent months, it was a high traffic area for immigration, illegal immigration between ports of entry. The military says that it's working hand in hand to back up Border Patrol with communication at every echelon.
These vehicles here are United States Army Stryker vehicles, and our soldiers are using these vehicles as part of our mission to detect and monitor traffic attempting to cross the border. However, you'll see that there are no machine guns or anti-tank missiles while we're down here supporting Border Patrol. So here in Nogales, we're using these vehicles almost exclusively for their cameras, as well as their ability, you can see they look fairly rugged and high off the ground, to traverse some rugged terrain that sometimes Border Patrol's pickup trucks aren't able to.
So this is the LRAD, stands for the Long Range Acoustic Device. It basically broadcasts any tone or any voice at a longer distance. Then we can inform them with this, and we can inform them that if they cross over the barrier, they will be in our national defense area. That is their early warning. If they cross into our national defense area, then they will be detained.
They're also using what they call drone buster technology. Smuggling organizations, human trafficking organizations are putting up drones, off-the-shelf drones into the skies to look for places where there's a gap in enforcement.
So I'm from Panama City, Panama, and I came to the United States around 12. With me also being an immigrant doing this mission, I feel like I'm doing a difference and a change in helping this country. For us at least, we're just watching, so we're not affecting anyone in any way. But if things get to be different, where there's a crime or something that's happening, we also have eyes on us where we can also say stop, and we can get BP to get there and stop that crime.
It's gotten a lot quieter in recent months, starting last year.
The extra layer of security that they bring, pretty much deploying their soldiers to these different positions, locations in between the ports of entry, it is crucial and has been significant for us because of the fact that we have seen the numbers suddenly decrease.
They're carrying service weapons, body armor, helmets. So that's a different side of the border than in the past, when the military had a smaller presence and it didn't have its new authority.
Inside an armored vehicle, an Army Scout uses a joystick to direct a long-range optical scope toward a man perched atop the U.S.-Mexico border wall, cutting across the hills of this Arizona frontier community. The man lowers himself toward the U.S. soil between coils of concertina wire. Shouts ring out, an alert is sounded, and a U.S. Border Patrol SUV races toward the wall, warning enough to send the man scrambling back over it, disappearing into Mexico. The sighting Tuesday was one of only 2 of the Army Infantry Unit patrolling this sector of the southern border, where an emergency declaration by President Donald Trump has thrust the military into a central role in deterring migrant crossings between the U.S. ports of entry. Deterrence is actually boring, said 24-year-old Army Sergeant Anna Harker Molina, voicing the TDM felt by some soldiers over the sporadic sightings during 2 days in which the Associated Press embedded the military on the border. Still, she said she takes pride in the work, knowing that troops discourage crossings by their mere presence. Just if we're sitting here watching the border, it's helping our country, said Harker Molina, an immigrant herself who came from Panama at age 12 and became a U.S. citizen 2 years ago while serving in the Army. U.S. troop deployments at the border have tripled to 7,600 and include every branch of the military. Even as the number of attempted illegal crossings plummet, and Trump has authorized funding for additional 3,000 Border Patrol agents, offering $10,000 signing and retention bonuses. U.S. military personnel are reflected on a map as they listen to Jose Luis Majeda during a briefing at the U.S. Border Patrol Station in Nogales, Arizona, Tuesday, July 22nd, 2025. The military mission is guided from a new command center at a remote Army intelligence training base along the southern Arizona Huachuca Mountains. There, a community hall has been transformed into a bustling war room of battalion commanders and staff, with digital maps pinpointing military camps and movements along the nearly 2,000-mile border. Until now, border enforcement had been in the domain of civilian law enforcement, with the military only intermediately stepping in. Military extends authority at border. The U.S. military has annexed long stretches of border to nearby military bases, empowering soldiers to arrest and detain people who enter the country illegally. But since April, large swaths of border have been designated militarized zones, empowering U.S. troops to apprehend immigrants and others accused of trespassing on Army, Air Force, or Navy bases, and authorizing additional criminal charges that can mean prison time. The two-star general leading the mission says troops are being untethered from maintenance and warehouse tasks to work closely with U.S. Border Patrol agents in high-traffic areas for illegal crossings, to deploy rapidly to remote, unguarded terrain. We don't have a labor union. There's no limit to how many hours we can work in a day, how many shifts we can man, said Army Major General Scott Nauman. I can put soldiers out whenever we need in order to get after the problem, and we can put them out for days at a time. We can fly people into incredibly remote areas now that we see the cartel shifting course. Patrols aimed at stopping gotaways. At Nogales, Army scouts patrolled the border in full battle gear, helmets, M4 service rifle, bullet-resistant vest, with the right to use deadly force if attacked, understanding military rules integrated into the border mission. Underfoot, smugglers for decades routinely attempted to tunnel into stormwater drains to ferry contraband into the U.S. U.S. Army Sergeant Brendan Richards monitors the area while standing next to a Stryker combat vehicle. Nauman's command post oversees an armada of 117 armored Stryker vehicles, more than 35 helicopters, and half a dozen long-distance drones that can survey the border day and night with sensors to pinpoint people wandering the desert. Marine Corps engineers are adding concertina wire to slow crossings as the Trump administration reboots border wall construction. Nauman said the focus is on stopping gotaways who evade authorities to disappear into the U.S. in a race against a clock that can last seconds in urban areas. As people vanish into smuggling vehicles. On several days in the dense wetlands thickets of the Rio Grande, or the vast desert and mountainous wilderness of Arizona. An aerial view shows mountainous terrain near Nogales, Arizona. Meanwhile, the rate of apprehensions at the border had fallen to a 60-year low. Nauman says the fall off in illegal entries is the elephant in the room. As the military increases pressure and resources aimed at starving smuggling cartels, including Latin American gangs, recently designated as foreign terrorist organizations. He says it would be wrong to let up, though, that crossings may rebound with the end of scorching summer weather. We have got to keep going after it. We're having some successes. We are trending positively, he said, the mission with no fixed end date. Militarized zones are a gray area. The Trump administration is using the military broadly to boost its immigration operations, from guarding federal buildings in Los Angeles against protests over ICE detentions, to assisting immigration and customs enforcement in Florida, to plans to hold detained immigrants on military bases in New Jersey, Indiana, and Texas. It's all part of the same strategy that is very muscular, robust, intimidating. Aggressive response to this. To show his base that he was serious about a campaign promise to fix immigration, said Dan Moyer, a law professor at Ohio Northern University and a retired U.S. Army Judge Advocate officer. It's both norm-breaking and unusual. It puts the military in a very awkward position. The militarized zones at the border sidestep the Posse Comitis Act, an 1878 law that prohibits the military from conducting civil law enforcement on U.S. soil. It's in that gray area. It may be a violation, it may not be. The military's always had the authority to arrest people and detain them on military bases, said Joshua Katzenberg, a professor at the University of New Mexico School of Law and a former Air Force judge. Michael Fisher, a security consultant and former chief of the Border Patrol from 2010 to 2016, calls the military expansion at the border a force multiplier. As Border Patrol agents increasingly turn up far from the border, the military allows Border Patrol to be able to flex into other areas where they typically would not be able to do so, he said. The strategy carries inherent moral challenges and political risks. In 1997, an 18-year-old U.S. citizen was shot to death while herding goats by a Marine Corps unit at a border anti-drug patrol in the remote Big Bend region of western Texas. Authorities say Ezekiel Hernandez had no connection to the drug trade and was an honor student. The shooting stoked anger along the border and prompted an end to then-President Bill Clinton's military deployment to the border. In New Mexico, the latest restrictions barring access to militarized zones have made popular areas for hunting, hiking, and off-road motorsports off limits for recreation, leading to an outcry from some residents. Nauman said adults can apply for access online by agreeing to undergo a criminal background check that he calls a standard requirement for access to military bases. We're not out to stop Americans from recreating in America. That's not what this is about, he said. Military-grade equipment. At daybreak Wednesday, Border Patrol vehicles climbed the largely unfenced slopes of Mount Cristo Rey, an iconic peak topped by a crucifix that juts into the sky above the urban outskirts of El Paso and Mexico's Ciudad Juarez, without another soul in sight. A view from inside a U.S. Border Patrol vehicle shows the U.S.-Mexico border fence at dawn in Sunland Park, New Mexico. The peak is at the conflux of two militarized zones, designated as extensions of Army stations at Fort Bliss in Texas and Fort Huachuca in Arizona. The Defense Department has added an additional 250-mile zone in Texas' Rio Grande Valley linked to an Air Force base. The Navy will oversee the border near Yuma, Arizona, where the Department of Interior on Wednesday ceded 32-mile portion of the border to the military. At Mount Cristo Rey, the Homeland Security Department has issued plans to close a 1.3-mile gap in the border wall over the objections of a Roman Catholic diocese that owns much of the land and says the wall would obstruct a sacred refuge for religious pilgrimages. From a nearby mesa top, Army's Luis Angel Nieto scanned the valley below Mount Cristo Rey with an infrared scope that highlights body heat, spotting 3 people as they crossed illegally into the U.S. for the Border Patrol to apprehend. Nito's unit also has equipment that can ground small drones. Used by smugglers to plot entry routes. Nito is the U.S.-born son of Mexican immigrants who entered the country in the 1990s. Through the same valleys he now patrols. They crossed right here, he said. They told me to just be careful because back when they crossed it, they said it was dangerous. Nito's parents returned to Mexico in 2008 amid the financial crisis, but the soldier saw brighter opportunities in the U.S., returned, and enlisted. He expressed no reservations about his role in detaining illegal immigrants. Obviously, it's a job, right? And then I signed up for it, and I'm going to do it, he said. At Mount Cristo Rey and elsewhere, troops utilized barked Border Patrol vehicles as Nauman champions the integration of civilian law enforcement and military forces. If there's a kind of secret sauce, if you will, it's integrating at every echelon, he said.